area, the mute group matrix. We have the 4 available mute groups, and we can do 4 permutations. So you may do something like this, so that when you press this button, you're muting only mute group A. When you press mute 2, you get A and B, A, B, and C, and all 4 of them right there. So it's just a matrix to determine how you're controlling your mute groups. This right here is a communication section. We have 2 identical control areas, so you can have 2 different combinations available. The idea is when you press a button down and hold it, your voice will be picked up by an onboard microphone and sent out whichever outputs you decide. For instance, out Q1, Q2, this was effects 1 and 2, but it will be Qs 3 and 4. This goes out the studio speakers. This is a slating function. Slating means to mark a take with your voice, to slate it as you do in the movies, to say this is take 3 of some particular song, and that will go out all 24 assignment buses and stereo A and stereo B. Often in analog recording, it's wise to utilize this oscillator. It's a dedicated 30 hertz oscillator, which whenever you have it depressed, it will go out with the slate, your voice, out all the same outputs, and it's useful for marking tapes so that when you fast forward or rewind with an analog tape, you can hear a beep as it goes by at about 1,000 hertz. This is, next to it, stereo A mix bus with master fader with unity at the top, stereo B master fader with unity gain at the top. Over to here, we have, let's go up to one of these guys here. There are 4 stereo outputs with identical functionalities, so we'll just talk about one of them. They have an on button, which utilizes turns Q2 on, a dim button, which would reduce its output by 18 dB. These buttons right here are source selector switches. You're determining what source do you want to create your headphone mix with. The first are aux sends, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, or you could send stereo A or stereo B, or whatever is selected in the studio stereo section or in the control room section. You can solo that stereo output. Here is mode switching, which allows when both switches are up for stereo, both are down, they're collapsed to mono. If only one is down, the other one is muted, and you just hear the left side, and now the left side is muted, and we only hear the right side. Here is level control for the overall send of Q2. Here's a balance control for the send. Here is a communication level, so when I press the COM button to go out Q2, this is going to be the level of my voice in the headphones. Here's echo return. If you're in Q2, it takes whatever's in echo return 3 and 4 and adds it to the headphone mix. If I were in Q1, it would be taking whatever's in echo return 1 and 2. Above that is a shelving equalizer with the high and low. If you enable it, then you can plus or minus 15 dB the high frequencies above 10K, or at plus or minus 15 dB the low frequencies below 100 hertz. And there's a 40 hertz low cut filter just like in the other paths. The other 3 of them are identical. Down here we have a lot of similar control for the control room section, similar things. An on button, a dim button, they work exactly the same. Source selectors for our studio speakers, tape 1 through 4, what's ever going to the studio, Q1 and Q2, the headphone outputs, and stereo mix bus A and stereo mix bus B. Mode switching is exactly the same. These 3 have to do with soloing functions. The default solo mode on the console is after fader listen. Pre-fader listen is selected like that. If you have some solos done, you want to defeat them all at one time, that button defeats solos. You still have to go and undo them, but while that button is switched, the solo mode has been disabled. That does not function for in-place solo, only AFL and PFL. This switch right here, or pot right there, controls the solo level. It's after the level control from the control room, so this has to be on and up, otherwise this won't work at all, but if it is, that controls how loud your solos are going to be. Almost identical for the studio section. In fact, it is identical except for this switch right here, or this pot again right there, called talkback. When you have this turned up and your voice has been sent out to the studio, this controls the level of my voice going out to the studio speakers. It is not dependent on this on switch or this level, which is different from what happens in the control room. Miscellaneous functions. VCA bypass. We have VCA control of our faders, but we don't use that system any longer, so we bypass them in both the mix and the channel path. Otherwise, it'd be an unnecessary gain stage, and we never want to do that. This enables speaker left and speaker right. This chooses our speakers, the Genelecs, the NS10s. There will be another set up there, but they are not up there now. This area here is the AUX Sends Master Control section. They have identical capability for all 10 of them, so we can just take a pair and say everything in there. So we have on switch. They both have to be turned on if it's a stereo send, which is true for 1 and 2, but this may not be the case here. Both turned on. This is how you would solo them. This is a pre-fader function, which is different than in the modules, meaning that if I'm using AUX 9 or 10 in one of our sections, for instance, the Q2 send, then I don't want to have redundant level control, having a level here and level on the stereo send. So by hitting pre, you don't have to turn this level up. This is the level for 10, this is the level for 9. But if you're in stereo operation, if you choose that, this is level for both, and this is a balance control. That can be level or balance depending on how that position that switch is in. And this is simply a LED meter to show you the level that's running through the AUX send. All that's identical. So then we come up top over here. This is the echo return area. We'll start talking here before we hit that. This is dedicated returns. The outputs of an effects processor is already coming back here. You do not have to patch it. You have to turn it on. You can solo it. These are not source selector switches because the source is already predetermined. What they are is assigning its output somewhere. You can go out stereo A, stereo B, or if you hit tracks, it engages the assignment matrix at the top of the module, allowing you to record the effect that you're enjoying there onto whatever tracks. It works the same way with level and pan that you have in channel path. And of course, there's level and pan across a mix bus if you go stereo A or stereo B. Same thing with the LEDs we talked about earlier. 3 and 4 is the same, except a different processor comes there. Then we have a built-in oscillator. This oscillator can produce a sine wave. You can turn it on. If you hit calibrate, it goes out at a calibrated 0 VU level, and you do not need to use the level control. If you do not hit calibrate, this controls the level of the oscillator. This is what's called a clip sine wave. If you want just the positive excursion, it takes the negative part and flips it up, so it goes an octave higher, but only positive excursion of the sine wave. This is sends it out stereo A and stereo B. This sends it out track. Now that looks identical to what it looks like in a echo return, but it's not. In this case, when you send it out track, it goes out all 24 buses without having to utilize that assignment matrix at the top. This is frequency selection, and this is a multiplier. So if you're at 50 hertz, as this is right now, that would be 50, that's 500, and that's 5,000. Here, the so-called danger zone. Why? Because this is destructive. These happen, for instance, if you're on stereo mix bus B, no, yes, and you're the master fader control. If I hit left plus right, I have monoed stereo B. That's different from going over to the control room section and hitting the mode switching. That makes it sound like stereo B's mono, but that's just in the monitors. This is actually monoing stereo mix bus B. If I hit A plus B on B, it's jumping the output of stereo mix bus A over to stereo mix bus B. A will still be on A, but both A and B will be combined on stereo mix bus B. Same stuff is true for stereo mix bus A. That monos it. This jumps B over onto A, so you have them in that configuration. Here is the solo mode for the dangerous solo mode, the in-place listen. This selects it, engages it for the channel path. That engages it for the mix path. And then there's the safe B and safe D function. If I've engaged in-place listen in mix and channel path, but I want to make sure some paths are never interrupted, because that's what IPL solo does. It interrupts non-soloed paths. Anything assigned in the channel path to mute group B will be safe from ever being muted by in-place listen, and D in the mix path, I pressed the wrong button, will be placed safe. So you can know that they will never be, their signal path will never be interrupted by some other signal being muted. So it's a safety function. And then lastly, up to the meter bridge area where we have slate level control. That's when we're slating a take, that's the level, but it does not function except in that very narrow range right there, so you're supposed to leave it. If we had an external area for a break room, I guess I left that off of when in the communication section. If we had a break room or a lobby that we wanted to be able to tell people we were ready for the next musicians, that we would utilize that. That would be the level to that, but ours is hooked up to nothing. That's the microphone that's built into the meter bridge, which we use with our communication system. When you use, we're talking, the communication light comes on. That's to say I press a COM button, and that light turns on to indicate that that is live. Below that is a solo button. Whenever I solo something, I get that indication on the meter bridge. This is very important. The A, B, and C, and D, the positive and negative lights must be on. That indicates the power supplies are functioning properly. If they're not, you call John right away. E and F are never on. It's for a larger frame console. Here's the 5 volts that does the internal switching, logic switching on the console. It shows you it's active. Here's a global phantom power. It's supposed to stay on all the time, and then it's just individually selected on modules. Here we have peak and presence threshold. There are 2 presets that function for when the peak light will come on in a module and the presence indicator will come on. If you want to geek out, you can go to vary and do your own custom level. Below that is the switching, very important, between peak and VU, although that's nearly worn off. We're supposed to only use peak because we're going to digital recorders, and the VU emulation isn't very good anyway. This controls the intensity of lights on the panel and the meter bridge up on here, and this is on the panel lights. And that is the midterm.